Hi guys, today I want to tell you a story about my experience flying with a wheelchair and cerebral palsy. If you don't know who I am, my name is Laura. I am an adult with quad spastic cerebral palsy that uses a manual wheelchair. I also have a roommate that has quad spastic cerebral palsy and uses a manual wheelchair as well. So in 2014, my roommate and I, as well as an attendant, a personal care worker, whatever you call them, they're called different things around the world, flew to California. Now, we took a domestic flight from a city in the U.S. to California, as it was considerably cheaper than flying internationally from Canada. So we get to California, have 10 wonderful days in California. If you've never been to California, I highly recommend Southern California. It's beautiful, and growing up in snow, capped California, or Canada, it was a breath of fresh air. We went in October, when it starts to get cold here, so it was nice. Anyway, the story really begins for me on the way home. We took a red-eye from California, and then the plan was to drive back to Canada. Once we landed in our destination, the American city, we'd drive back here to Canada, and that would be the end of the trip. Well, we had a few layover. That was a couple hours long. So we get on the flight, the red-eye in California, a few hours there in the air. We land at our layover destination. Now, you need to know that our layover destination, and I don't mean to laugh when I say this, I still worry about this passenger to this day, but when I'm nervous, I laugh. Okay. About 30 minutes outside of our layover destination, there was a medical emergency, and this poor woman that was traveling alone had to be evacuated by paramedics off the airplane. Anyway, we don't know what happened to her, but it was rather scary as a, bystander. Anyway, so our layover was shortened, I guess. But I get off the plane, and I had gate checked my wheelchair, only to discover that my wheelchair was not there. They tried to put me in my roommate's wheelchair. And if you know anything about wheelchairs, well, let's just say they're custom fit to you, and her wheelchair wouldn't have fit me. Or fit me properly, I should say. It didn't fit me. So they immediately put me in a airport wheelchair at my request instead of hers, so that she could use hers. And went on a mad hunt to find my gate-checked wheelchair. Well, apparently this is what happened. My gate-checked wheelchair hadn't been gate-checked, and they didn't know where it was. It's 7 in the morning. I've been flying all night. I still have an hour and a half flight to go to get to my destination before driving a few hours home. Needless to say, I am not impressed. In fact, I am rather calmly but angry about the whole situation because I'm exhausted. So they were like, "Oh, sorry ma'am, we don't know where your chair is, but it was probably flown to your destination, and you'll find it there. But right now it's not in our computer at all." Okay. So they're like, if you get to your destination and it's still not there, file a missing luggage complaint. I was like, alright, don't worry, I will. So I had my wits about me, thank God. I get to the destination location and it's still not there. And I was smart enough to ask for the claim from the airline in writing on official letterhead that said, all damages and or replacement of the chair will be covered by the airline in the event that they are not able to locate my wheelchair. And I asked what the policy was about how long they had to recover my share. I was horrified to find out that the answer was 28 days. So basically, technically, I'm without a wheelchair for 28 days. They offered me a airport wheelchair. Not sufficient in my head, people. In order to travel on transit here in Canada, you're required, if you're in a wheelchair and have tie downs and, you're using accessible transit, to have a lap belt, a seat belt. So, you're not flying around out of your chair on the vehicle. I'm just saying, Well, if you know anything about those generic hospital and or airport wheelchairs, they don't have seat belts. So I made them rent me a chair from a wheelchair company. So, consider this a PSA. Know the measurements of your chair before you travel. I thankfully at the time, or shortly therebefore, worked for a wheelchair company and knew the dimensions of the chair that I was currently using. So I was able to say this is exactly what I need in order to be successful, in my own transfers. And, because I didn't want to get in a situation where I couldn't transfer myself, which is what I was accustomed to doing at home. So they rented me a wheelchair. We drove home with the rented wheelchair under the impression they were still hunting for my wheelchair with the documentation that had said that they were covering all damages. I refused to tell them the cost of my wheelchair until I had that piece of paper in my hand. There's a very good reason I did that. At the time, my chair cost, and it's a manual, people, it's not even a power chair. It's not the current chair I have now. I have another one since then. But at the time, my chair cost $26,213 because I have custom molding in my seating, and it was a titanium frame. So anyway, I had the documentation that said they'd cover everything, either replacement and or damages, because there was no damages when I got on the plane, let's be real. So I get home, and I get a call the next day from my wheelchair company asking if I had been in the U.S. recently. And I called them back and I said, yes, why? They said they've located your wheelchair in a different state. Basically, the long and short of the story is they loaded my chair on the wrong plane and sent it to a completely different city. So they were able to trace it back to me because the chair company that I use has serial numbers that are linked to, specific to each individual chair. So my chair's serial number is different than my roommate's. So then they were able to call the wheelchair company, whose sticker's also on, with the phone number of them, on the chair, and say, we have this random wheelchair, can you tell us who it belongs to? And through the serial number, they were able to trace it back to me. Now, I have never been more happy to see the FedEx guy that showed up at my door with my wheelchair the next day. And yes, the airline covered that cost to send it back to me. And yes, there was no damages, thankfully. But that's not the point. Make sure you cover your butt and make sure that you know you're within your rights to say, I'm not telling you that information until I have the claim in my hand in writing that says you're covering the entire thing. Because otherwise, you're on the hook for any damages that the airline causes. Anyway, so I got my chair back within 24 hours. All was well. I was grateful to have it back. But it's worth noting when you travel to know what your chair height is and, your dimensions of your seating and whatnot to make it as comfortable as possible for yourself in case something like this does happen, because it could happen. And I never expected it to happen, but it did happen, and I was grateful to be prepared. And it wasn't even that I prepared, but I just happened to know for knowledge's sake at the time. I don't even know on this chair. Maybe I should look into that on my new one, in terms of what my seat-to-floor height is and such, because it's changed with this chair. This chair is slightly taller than my last one. But yeah, this video is getting on 9 minutes long. I think I'm going to stop talking, but that's my story time for you, everybody, and I hope you found it useful. Anybody that wants to know how they get you actually on the plane, I can tell you that as well. But I don't know if you want to sit here and listen to this whole thing, but basically I'll say it now and then I'll probably edit the video anyway. Basically, this is how it works. It's like a dolly that they use to move, heavy cases of pop, or I can't even think of what they actually use it for, but it's like a commercial dolly, and that they tilt back and then they roll on the two wheels, but it has a seat on it and you're strapped onto that seat, and then they roll that through the aisle of the airplane. The airplane is stored under the belly of the plane, which is why my chair was lost and sent on a different plane. So that's how that works. And I hope to see everybody next Monday for another video. I hope you found this story time informative and interesting, and yeah, like I said, I left out the airline because I have nothing, honestly, but positive reviews of them because they bent over backwards for me. And actually, the bigger the airline, the safer you are in terms of traveling with a disability. Some airlines literally say in the small print, travel at your own risk, which effectively means you're liable for any damages that may occur, which is at least how I understand it. I'm no lawyer or what have you, so don't take my word for it, but that's how I understand what that means. So I choose to fly with the larger airlines when I fly. But anyway, that's my story, and I hope you found it helpful, informative, interesting, you know. And we'll see everybody Monday. Alright, take care, everybody. Bye.